Hey guys, new video here, talking about some of the changes in the 3.9 patch notes and balance manifesto. In this video, I'm not going to focus on everything. I want to talk about only the things that are kind of important to me or relevant to me in some way in the league, because there's so many things in this patch notes I could spend like over an hour on, even going over just the highlights. So I won't do that. You can watch other videos for that. So let's get started. Arc has been given some of its chaining distance back. That's great. It used to be 50, now it's 35. Currently, before this patch, we had 25. So adding 10 units is pretty huge. That is going to enable a lot of people to feel better clearing packs with this skill. Huge buff to performance. Before, arrows were sticking into the walls. Too many arrows, too many objects in the map was causing significant performance issues. So now the arrows have a chance of bouncing off the walls, bouncing off rocks and terrain. That's great. Anything that increases our frame rate is pretty darn good. I'm happy with that. Huge buff is that the Blight mechanic has been added to the core game. Just like abysses and breaches, you're going to be able to find them in 10% of your maps. 10% chance is actually pretty high if you think about how often you see a breach and an abyss in your maps, sometimes both. Another thing is that they've changed it so that when you open the rewards, if you have successfully completed a Blight, you're going to have a much higher chance of dropping either an oil chest or having a blighted map come out of those rewards, right? They said they use the word like significantly increase, which means that I'm going to guess there's always going to be either a blighted map or an oil. And that's pretty great because the blighted map rewards are just insane, and getting them, like, not having to do the blight every map is great, but when you get one you should be excited because a 5-minute map, a 5-minute blighted map for the rewards that you can get is insane. Okay, huge buff to explosive arrow. Explosive arrow, they reduce the mana cost, so it's actually kind of similar to the mana cost of tornado shot. If you played that, very easy to sustain. What happens is the charges don't add to the duration anymore. They don't refresh the duration. So now when you stack it, it has by default a 1-second timer. After the 1 second, all the stored charges will explode. Now this is huge because before, if you kept attacking, it would just never explode, so it's kind of a bad skill. And you think about it, we have Mirage Archer nowadays, so it was kind of weird. Now you stack the charges, you explode. It's pretty fast. 1 second default is great. Another thing is that by adding stacks, you are adding radius. It goes up to 19 base radius now. If you can get it up that high, you probably won't have that high, but the base radius is 15, so adding anything on top of there with thinking about how many arrows you get, the arrows stick into the walls, so there's a sizable amount of AoE. There is a more damage with ignite multiplier. Fire damage, that initial hit is going to stack up a big ignite. It can clean up beyonds. Very good for headhunter builds, very good for clear. Some people might not like the delayed damage, but it is pretty good. A huge part of this buff is also, although the top end added fire damage is slightly lowered, going from the 879 top end to 783, you're going to gain a 50% of your base damage. Okay, so the bow you use and anything added to that is going to be added as well. So it's not just, it's not like a spell where it's just that base damage. So that's pretty huge. They actually removed it from the patch notes, but Rory confirmed on Reddit that is still in the game. So you get base added damage, and then you have your weapon and other sources. So that's pretty great. One of the buffs is to item filters. Item filters can now be stored on the official Path of Exile website. So if you log on to your account, even from console or another computer, you have that item filter. Currently, item filters are placed in your documents folder, like My Games, Path of Exile. And so if your computer crashes or you get a new computer, you actually have to like physically transfer it over. So this is a great change. Also, from the Reddit post, we see that we can actually subscribe to a filter in the future. So you guys like NeverSync or these other popular filters, you can subscribe to them and they'll auto update in a way, and that is amazing. First, besides Metamorph, they're adding 16 new uniques to the game. That's pretty awesome. New uniques can enable some pretty OP combos. They can enable cool playstyles. Along with 16 new uniques, we're going to have 35 awakened support gems. If you look on the item filter forum post, you can see exactly what those awakened support gems are. Pretty good selection to choose from. Obviously, some are way more OP than others because some are just percentage of more damage modifiers, but some change the way that a skill can function. So these will be pretty rare, but really fun to get from Killing the Conquerors. There's 14 new div cards. You guys don't know, div cards are created by supporters. They are, I think it's like $600 to create a divination card. So having 14 new of those could be nice. We might see some harder to get items, become more common with these divination cards. There's a lot of numbers and mechanics in this shock and chill balance, but just to give it a TLDR, overall, it's going to be way easier to apply shock and chill. It's also going to be a lot easier to apply it to the big boys in the game, the bosses. So that is a buff across the board for most players. And other things to look at are there are also new items coming out that will also buff that. Fortify has been nerfed a little bit in the way that it's harder to get immune builds now. Point blank on the tree is kind of weird because it looks like a nerf, but it's really not. Point blank give you 50% more at very, very close range, right? What was it, like 10 or 15? But now it only gives you 30% more. It's still fine. You can still get it on a quiver as a corruption. It's still a massive more damage multiplier. And now it deals more damage at further ranges. So before, projectiles that were at the far distances on the map, they would get 50% less damage. Now you only have 30% less damage, which means that it's a buff to map clearing. This is a huge buff to map clearing, and because remember, the bow skills, most of them were buffed in their base damage and their effectiveness. So now you're going to see heavier clear at the edges of your screen. That's great. Ray Zombie got huge nerfs. It will still be fine in terms of single target. The clearing, because the minions have had their speed slightly reduced. They've had their slam, which was their AoE attack, both increased in duration. 50% increase to the duration before it comes off cooldown again, as well as a massive nerf to the AoE. It used to be 28 units, now it's 17. And then also other nodes that affect zombies on a tree have also been nerfed. So overall, big nerfs. Also nerfs to the life of the zombies, as well as the as just overall damage was reduced by 25% at all gem levels. So it'll still be okay. It'll just require more investment than before. Inspiration support, a little bit off the more multiplier on the top, and it's very, very slight nerf to the crit chance that you gained. I wouldn't worry about this nerf. The inspiration skill gem is still incredible for what it does. Burning Arrow. Burning Arrow is absolutely ridiculous of a buff. It converts everything to fire. You don't need a Watcher's Eye, the Andrew Watcher's Eye with 40% conversion. You don't need any conversion items, although there are a lot of fizz to fire conversion items. It's 100% converted right away. That's one less thing you have to worry about. Another thing, it has more chance to ignite. Now this only matters at the lower levels, because when you get into max, it's very easy to get like 100, 150 plus ignite chance. This is one of the reasons why the maps that have like 90% chance to avoid ailments or whatever, those maps don't matter for fire-based characters, because you're just igniting everything on the screen, right? No matter what the map mods are. So that's insane. So now it's 50% at level 1, right? 20% buff there, and then 49% at level 20. So I'm guessing 50% at level 21. And then what that means is that from an early character standpoint, you were gonna see some pretty fat ignite chance, like half. Think about it, at level 1, half your attacks are igniting enemies. That's pretty crazy. Not only that, you now have more damage with Ignite at level 1. It's 50% more now. It used to be 30%. That is huge, because it's hard to get more damage with Ignite modifiers after you get like the basic stuff, right? And then after that, going up to level 20. Level 20 is 88%. That's 20% up from 68%. So that's just huge, right? If you're igniting more often early on and the Ignite is going to hit harder, that makes leveling with it a lot better. Another thing is that it's going to apply an additional debuff. I think it's like high 30% chance, stacks up to 5 times. Now, this is not considered an Ignite. You can't prolif this, but when you ignite, there's now an additional debuff, which is a portion of the Ignite. Okay, think about how crazy that you ignite, but then now you have a smaller Ignite, not even that much smaller, right? 30-something%, and it stacks 5 times. That's absolutely ridiculous. Also, you have a fire damage over time multiplier per 2 gem quality, meaning if you have a 20% quality gem, you're gonna have 10% fire damage over time multi. This is insane as well, because if you think about it, this is usually gotten with jewels on the skill tree. Sometimes lethal pride nodes, if you can get one of those. Sorry, lethal pride nodes are faster burn, but that's also in here. So you are going to be doing so much more damage for free that you did not have before, right? Before it was in ignite duration, but that doesn't matter. Now you have a true multiplier to your damage. Once again, helps the early levels. It's so crazy what they've done to the skill. Can't wait to try this out. Onslaught for leveling was also nerfed. It only lasts 3 seconds instead of 8. That's pretty huge. It's also got a slightly less chance to get it, so that feels kind of bad. With the fossil crafts, there's a whole host of fossil crafts. Basically what they're doing is they've taken off a lot of the fossil crafts. For example, the +1 curse on the chest. They're taking off the subterranean roll that you could get with the pristine fossils, and a whole host of other things. Now this doesn't really matter because we don't know what those 4 new exalted orbs that are being added to the core game will do. Those exalted orbs might add things that are just as powerful or more powerful than these, which is maybe why they had to take that off, along with things like support gems being on like two-handed weapons and stuff like that, right? So I wouldn't worry too much, because remember, one of the exalted orbs, one of the affixes, is Tailwind. If you can't wrap your mind around how insane that is to give Tailwind to any character, well, then you might worry about these crafting modifiers, right? But if you see that affix, then you know there's going to be equally powerful affixes, right, that they haven't teased yet. And so you'll be able to make these up with the new exalted orbs. Other things, there's mods that have nothing to do with the fossil crafts that are also getting toned down a little bit. Some of the more powerful numeric affixes are going to get reduced, and I think this is fine because those affixes were insane. For example, the scepters getting like a triple fizz/Ellie as extra on one weapon, and then being able to multi-mod it, that's just nuts, right? They are also changing the multi-mod, so that multi-mod can only have 2 extra crafts on it besides the multi-mod, so 3 total, right? The multi-mod and then 2 others of your choice. I think this is very good. Too many people were using multi-modded weapons. It was just kind of lame. You know, all the item posts on Reddit were kind of lame because of that, because they were just crafted items. Tornado shot nerfs are pretty bad. The secondary projectile now is going to decay, kind of like freezing pulse. It won't lose the damage, but it will slowly disappear. So heavily nerfed range on the secondary projectiles. It's about time. Tornado shot has been way too good for way too long, so I love this nerf. Now you have to invest heavily in projectile speed if you want to get that secondary barrage to cover a lot more area, which is kind of interesting because Tornado shot has very low projectile speed compared to something like lightning arrow. So you kind of wanted some barrage speed on Tornado shot anyways. It'll be fun to see how much you can scale the range on the TS with certain gear and with certain nodes on the tree. Also maybe with certain crafts and stuff like that. So that'll be it'll be nice to see the exact range that it covers now. Elemental hit got nerfed. Soul Rend got a 50% buff to its base duration from 0.4 to 0.6. That's amazing. That means in a lot of instances you won't have to cast Soul Rend as much, right? Slightly less casting is always good for the smoothness, the tactile feel of the builds. Icicle mines have been nerfed across the board. It feels kind of bad. They have less projectiles, and then also they gain projectile speed per quality, which is a little bit better because the way it's going to work is like freezing pulse. As the projectiles start traveling, they will just decay, and then they will just disappear. Now that decay does not actually lessen the damage like freezing pulse, which is important to note, but it will make your range a lot shorter. You're not going to be off screen as easily without some serious projectile speed modifiers. And this mine was causing some pretty significant performance issues, which is why they decided to do it. It was a little bit too strong, I think, for a mine for what it could do. And anything that improves the performance for everyone else in the game is a welcome change. Ice Shot got buffed a little bit across the board. Lightning Arrow got pretty huge buffs. It is now actually 110 base at level 1, a little bit extra there, and then 134 up from 119 at level 20. That's great. Now the shock, though, it shocks enemies based on your hit, but then it multiplies it as if you were doing more damage. So you don't actually do more damage, but the shocks are easier to apply. There's new items coming into the game like Voltaxic Rift, which makes it pretty hilarious. Voltaxic Rift might see a return as like a kind of like a core lightning arrow bow, unless people craft like mirror worthy ones. We've shown before that you don't need that great of a bow for these bow skills to really shine. So I'm happy to see that Voltaxic classic item is coming back. Additionally, there's now more shock effect attached to lightning arrow. So not only is it easier to shock, also easier to get bigger shocks, but you have shock effect, which multiplies your damage a little bit more. That's really nice to see. Orb of Storms got nerfed significantly, it was primarily used as a leveling skill, although the mapping version will still be very good. That's important to note. Mapping will still be very good, but from a leveling standpoint, they nerfed the damage slightly. 10-20% nerf there, it looks like, from the very early levels, scaling up to not really a nerf at level 20. Once again, it will be fine at the end game. However, at the early levels, the striking frequency, it strikes every 1.5 seconds instead of 1 second across the board from before. So you have to wait a little bit before that hit goes out, so making it a little less effective at clearing out the mobs. And then once again, at level 20, there's really no nerf at all. So they really don't want you just using this, and they don't want everyone using this to cruise through the leveling process at the start of a league. Beyond is on the map device. It's a Beyond League. It's a double Beyond League. It can possibly be a triple Beyond League with a Watchstone. This is insane. Whale side areas in maps at a 10% chance, like the other content, like the Breach, the Cassie, the Abyss. Fantastic. More sack frags, more Zeri runs, more of that loot coming into the market faster. Soul of Self-Found, that's a great change. The Demon double corrupted headhunter card is going to be in well, we've known that drops from the whale side areas, but now if you were a mapping character, if you were a mapping character, you never went into any side areas unless you were in Blood Aqueducts before you got your tabby. Now there's a chance for us mappers to drop a demon even if the map doesn't have the tagged roles for the demon, if they ever change where that card drops in the future. This is a fantastic change. A little bit of jambling, also getting the whale skills that you need early on. It's going to be pretty much free. It's going to be fantastic. Shaper Scarabs, Elder Scarabs are finally getting more of a use. They're actually becoming OP because not only do they add the influence to the map, so more monsters, you can think of them as maybe like half a sextant in terms of monster count. You can also think of them as more items found, because not only are you getting the influence, so naturally dropping those backgrounded items, but now they have 30, 60, and 90, depending on the type and quality of the scarab, to drop more of those types of items. That's insane. That's going to allow certain types of farming that we didn't have before, and with the less common, Shaper and Elder fights, that's great as well. Huge buff to Scarabs. Scarabs have been buffed in terms of you now drop way more Scarabs, okay? Because the Scarabs, you have the safe house, right? And if you got that, you got 1 if you opened it. Boss thing, you got like 2. Now it's just more Scarabs across the board. Everything has a chance. Killing the Mastermind itself can give you Scarabs. Before, when you killed Katarina, no Scarabs. Now Scarabs 100% of the time. That's amazing. With fossil crafting, they're removing the maim modifier, so when you're crafting your Elder Astral Plate, can't get the maim on there anymore. Also, the subterranean roll on the pristine, like I said before, is getting removed. So a little bit less life, a little bit less damage, but once again, remember, there are new exalted orbs coming. Unique item balance, there's a lot of different uniques in here, but the one that I really care about is, I guess, Cool Rain is a bow. You get, instead of 40% less damage, you get 30% buff to Toxic Rain if you want to use that bow for Toxic Rain to start the league. Another thing is the Exopiage's Nurture. This is a bow that used to just give you a radius 15 Ignite Prolift, but now you actually get the level 20 Ignite Prolift gem. That is level 20, meaning that it is it's a 20 radius, and that can be scaled by AoE. That is massive. It's a free 7 link that doesn't take away from the damage multipliers that you would have had if you didn't have to use this gem. So this bow, easy to get, easy to upgrade. I predict that this bow will be used quite a bit at the league start. Overall, bosses are becoming more difficult in terms of the leveling process, as well as map bosses. Monsters are getting more resist, more armor. If you are gonna do T16 maps from tier 1 to tier 16, it's more of a linear scale, to the point where you will definitely notice that if you have bad gear or a bad character, you notice that the bosses at the end of maps are much tankier. Labyrinth enchants, pretty huge. If you know the AoE if you know the AoE enchants from before, they were complete garbage. 8 for Merciless, 12 for Overlab. Now they're 16 and 24. A perfectly rolled Dying Sun is 25% in KoE. So you're basically getting a Dying Sun for free on these enchants. And a lot of these skills nowadays are still kind of boring with their enchants, in terms of you choose attack speed, AoE, or 40% damage. That's so boring. But now, because a lot of the skills you will be playing in the meta this league have those enchants, you're just going to choose the AoE, and the AoE will be huge, and that's great. Synthesis maps are going to drop as unique items. You need to be in red maps, tier 14 for the Cortex. The fact that these can drop now and are sellable is amazing, because you can target farm what you want. You know, you don't have to rely on if I'm going to get it from the master, although the master can also give it to you. The master does have a chance to sell you one. This is such a crazy change in terms of deterministic farming, because you can just farm the currency to buy a Cortex if you want that. If there are challenges in the future related to these, those challenges are now completable just by farming the currency for them. And so this is a change that's been a long time coming. It also leads to us thinking, is synthesis in a way gonna go core for synthesized items and their implicits, right? So that's also exciting, because we have an entire league that is not being used in the current game. Another huge buff to players, especially new players, is there is no longer that very long Zana quest line that sometimes you couldn't get to because the influence was in a weird spot. You had to push the influence into a weird spot. Now all you have to do is complete maps to unlock the roles on the map device. Now, how's that different from before? Well, now if you're a noob, you can just farm the currency. Let's say a tier 10 map one day is 2C. You just farm the 2C and you buy the tier 10 maps, right? Each of them for 2C, and then now you can unlock maybe Nemesis. Maybe now you can unlock Beyond, right? And so before you couldn't do that unless you push the specific purple circles onto the Atlas, and that was kind of confusing, I think, for newer players. So this is accessibility change. It's great. Mirage Archer, heavy nerf to Mirager in terms of the damage. You have 31% less damage at level 20. Before it was 11%, so that is huge for the damage of the Mirage Archer and your damage as well. But it doesn't matter, because once you have the good gear and you have your character going and you have stacks and all this other stuff, you will be doing more than enough damage with the buffs to the other arrow skills. Now, the bigger thing to worry about is the targeting range. Now, you might think that this is a big nerf. 105 was the distance before. Now, 105 is essentially 3.5 discharge radiuses, right? I use discharge a lot as a radius base because everyone's played discharge, so everyone kind of knows how big that radius feels initially. So it is 3.5 discharges before. Now it is only 2 1/3 discharges, right? 70 units is the new range. The reason this doesn't matter is because you have point blank on most bow skills. So you were running through all the monsters anyways, like while you were clearing the map and picking up loot, because remember, once a monster drops some loot, you gotta run to that location to pick it up. We don't have area loot yet. So you're going to be running through the monsters. If you're fast enough, it doesn't really matter. The 70 units will be more than enough for the Mirage Archer to shoot, and it still has the same attack speed multipliers, right? It has less attack speed, but the attack speed wasn't nerfed, so it's still going to be good. Just clear faster, pick up items faster. It's going to be totally fine at endgame maps. Rain of Arrows, one of my favorite skills. Actually, my favorite skill to level with got buffed. The base damage got 20% buff up to 60%. So once again, 20% buff at level 1, 20% buff at level 20. This is going to make Rain of Arrows still my go-to leveling skill. It's going to feel a lot better than before, even if you use Twink gear. Labyrinth enchants, pretty huge. If you know the AoE buffs, if you know the AoE enchants from before, they were complete garbage. 8 for Merciless, 12 for Overlab. Now they're 16 and 24. A perfectly rolled Dying Sun is 25% in AoE. So you're basically getting a Dying Sun for free on these enchants. And a lot of these skills nowadays are still kind of boring with their enchants in terms of you choose attack speed, AoE, or 40% damage. That's so boring. But now, because a lot of the skills you will be playing in the meta this league have those enchants, you're just going to choose the AoE, and the AoE will be huge, and that's great.